Biliyor musun? Erken rezervasyon başladı. Yazın en renkli fırsatları cyprusparadise.com'da. %40, %50 hatta %60'a varan kaçırılmaz indirimler. Erken rezervasyon yap, uçak bileti fiyatına paket tatili al. Uygun fiyata Kıbrıs tatilinin adresi cyprusparadise.com. Zaman akıp gitmeden acele edin. Bir bakmışsınız yaz gelmiş. Cyprus Paradise. Tatiliniz bizimle güvende.
Kalitenin, güvenin, hızlı teslimatın adresi Ancon Furniture. Ancon Furniture ailesi olarak yeni ürünler ile hizmete devam etmekteyiz. Yeni model koltuk takımlarımız, yatak mekanizmaları bir dokunuş ile açılıp bir dokunuş ile kapanabilmektedir. Bir dokunuş ile açtığımız yatak mekanizmasının yatak çarşafı kullanıma hazır, serili olarak içinden çıkmaktadır. Yıl sonuna kadar herhangi bir koltuk takımı alan her müşterimize akıllı sehpa hediyemizdir. En iyi ürün, en iyi fiyat. Sadece Ancon Furniture'da. Bize uğramadan karar vermeyin. En iyisini biz yapana kadar daha iyisi yok.
Welcome to the latest printed press and a special episode that continues to look at young Turkish Cypriot professionals. And I'm really happy today to be interviewing Serkan Birgel, who is a researcher at TRT World Research Centre, and he holds a PhD from the School of Geography and the Environment, University of Oxford. Sorry, I had to get that in as well. Welcome Serkan to the programme. How are we tonight?
Very well, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, not too bad. And also, I'd like to tell our audiences, where are you currently? What country?
Here in North Cyprus in Nicosia.
Yeah, so one good thing about having COVID restrictions is that we're doing this over, Skype, and, we're getting to connect with lots of different people, and it's a pleasure to be able to connect to you in Northern Cyprus. And I know that there is a slight change in time as well. Are you 2 hours ahead or 3 hours currently?
2 hours ahead, yeah, at the moment.
Okay. So it's not too late. So thank you very much for coming on. I mean, first of all, what I'd like to cover is a little bit about your background and your education at the beginning.
Well, where do I start? I mean, Turkish Cypriot, my dad's side of the family are from Paphos, mum's side from Famagusta. They came to the UK in the 1960s and 70s, largely due to the sort of situation on the island, looking for opportunities for themselves and a better livelihood. I ended up being born in Famagusta because I think that a lot of my family was still sort of here. So there's a kind of like 2/3 in Cyprus, 1/3 in the UK split. And ever since then, we've always been going back and forth to Cyprus. I was one of those ones where, every summer, every school holiday in the summer, it was 6 weeks in Cyprus. There wasn't anywhere else that we would go. And that was a good thing because we always had that connection, always built up those relationships and maintained them with our family, which is a big family. And I like the community spirit. I like the kind of extended family and them to be close and so on and so forth.
Yes.
Education-wise, I'll just give you the sort of most recent one. I, at the age of 22, started a PhD or a DPhil, doctorate of philosophy at the School of Geography in Oxford, and I finished that. Started that in 2014, finished in sort of end of 2018, start of 2019. So I was 26 when I finished, which is quite early and quite quick to do a doctorate, but it's not too uncommon. And I went through higher education without taking any breaks. So I went from my undergrad straight to a master's and straight to a doctorate. I've been in sort of the real world, quote unquote, for about a year and a half, 2 years. So I'm still very early in my career.
Yeah. Yeah, it sounds amazing. I mean, where you studied is an amazing place. So you did really, really well. And the fact that you did in such a short space of time as well is very commendable. So how did you get into journalism and research? What made you decide to go down that career path?
I think research was always my bread and butter skill. Just having a very sort of curious and inquisitive mind, always questioning things and so on and so forth. Being kind of very thoughtful about everything that I kind of encounter. When it came to the media, I work at TRT World, as you've said. They simply approached me at a time when I was quite upset at the nature of media coverage, especially on Turkey, but not just Turkey, I mean just media in general. And coming from a background where, we all know the situation in Cyprus and the Cyprus problem and the politics and so on and so forth, we sort of don't take to very simplistic explanations of what's going on in that part of the world too easily. We get riled quite easily, and it's hard to kind of switch off from politics and the media. And I thought that I could try and use some of the kind of insights that I gleaned or some of the kind of conclusions that I came to from my work to try and spread a bit of calm to the storm, to use that metaphor. I wanted to be someone who adopts a conciliatory tone and to explain situations in a way that would be constructive. But I thought the discourse, the rhetoric and so on and so forth it was perpetuated by everyone, and it was destructive. It wasn't going anywhere. It was bittering, and I felt that all of this could be avoided. And I thought that people could do better, but it's quite hard, to swim against the tide.
Yes. Yes.
And so that's how I found myself at TRT World. I was just passionate about the politics, even though politics can be very, very frustrating. I thought that I could, chip in and try and sort of help out in a certain way. But I think there are some problems with the world of the media, especially as it's kind of expressed nowadays, and especially with social media. Everyone's got their quick take, everyone's got their response immediately, and usually kind of the right answer is the one that comes later on, or the kind of the more nuanced sort of thoughtful answer takes a longer time to create.
Yes, definitely. No, you're right about that. I mean, it sort of leads me on to, you've sort of slightly touched upon it already, but have you got any highlights or any memorable moments of your career so far? Because obviously when you say to somebody you work at TRT World, it sounds like quite a glamorous job, doesn't it? It seems like it's quite glamorous, and you're meeting lots of famous people and famous politicians. But at the end of the day, I'm sure the reality could be quite different. But can you tell us any highlights or any low points, as a matter, if you have any low points of your career so far, something memorable?
I think not really a low point, but when I got to Turkey from the UK, which is quite a sort of a change of environment and scene and culture and all that, I think that soon after the pandemic kicked off.
Yeah.
And we went through various kind of lockdown regimes and so on and so forth. So it was kind of hard to make the most out of the city and to kind of make the most out of the kind of community at TRT World, which is very international. So working there didn't feel like, too different from many other sort of international institutions, lots of different people from lots of different sort of countries and so on and so forth. And I like that. I didn't find any trouble fitting in. But things could have possibly been better, though we can't live the counterfactual. Highlight, was perhaps, there have been many, but one that comes to mind was when I reported on the Turkish Cypriot elections live on TV as a correspondent. It's not my job title. It's not something that I'm just a researcher at the research centre and so on. But I was here at the right time, at the right place, and I had that experience of going live on television, being a kind of correspondent, like a real journalist. You see what I mean? That was quite interesting. A lot of responsibility, of course, and you're live on television. You can't sort of babble too much. You kind of want to talk more, perhaps, if you know a lot about the island's politics, but you have to be very short, succinct, to the point, to the best of your abilities. I was also here when the Marash suburb of Famagusta also was open, so I got to see that, and I got to sort of help out with the field production for a sort of short video documentary, that TRT World prepared. So, yeah, that's been quite interesting.
Yeah, definitely. I can imagine the Monash opening. That would have been quite a big day, and it would have been a very memorable one, because obviously it was making history. And again, going on and talking about the politics of Northern Cyprus, being a Turkish Cypriot, obviously, I'm sure you enjoyed that very much. Now we've got some comments. We've got Ertan Kalpaslı, Napan Komşu. So obviously you know each other. I'm assuming by that. Erin Meto has said, great seeing these amazing young people being platformed, and Orhan Sedat has put very enjoyable. So lots of people saying lots of positive comments. I mean, obviously, I do feel like the fact that you are so educated and you are working in such a prestigious place, and you are a journalist and a researcher, means that you are quite an inspiration for people on our community. So my next question is, has that been a barrier to you, being a Turkish Cypriot, or has it been a support mechanism?
I had the typical Turkish Cypriot upbringing. My uncles on both sides, it was either fish and chips, cafe, or dry cleaning. And that's it. I'm the only one really that's taken their education to this level. I have one other cousin who's also very successful. He studied genetics at UCL on a Fulbright scholarship that was offered back then in Cyprus in the early 90s. He did molecular genetics or something like that, and he started working for Cancer Research UK and so on and so forth. Now as a kind of pharmaceutical consultant. But apart from him, it's me out of the whole sort of extended family, and we've got a very, very large family and lots of aunties and uncles on either side. Some of whom have passed away, unfortunately. I was inspired by the politics because that was what we were talking about at home. It was always on the agenda, always something that our parents were talking about, and so on and so forth. So I couldn't help but be curious about it almost. I couldn't help but sort of having these questions in my mind. It wasn't my only passion. I was quite good and adept at other subjects. I was one of those typical hardworking Turkish Cypriot students. I was good at maths and chemistry and physics and geography. Those were my A-levels. But I ended up taking geography forward because A, I was inquisitive about, the wider world. B, I got to explore the Cyprus problem, which had always been on my mind. Part of those two reasons combined meant that, these things, these kind of political events, even though we might not like them and the way they're being described and narrated and so on and so forth, they're so sort of fundamental to us, these political decisions. to our lives. Imagine if, for example, if there was a solution in Cyprus, how advantageous that could be, not just to the people on the island, but also to the kind of countries, the stakeholders, the companies. There'd be a great peace dividend to be at hand. And it's quite exciting to be a part of kind of that discussion. It can be quite, debilitating, being always exposed to goings on in the world. You want to tune out sometimes, and you kind of find that you can't. So there are positives and negatives to it. The Turkish Cypriot community, support-wise, no. But when I reach out, when I take the initiative, yes. So no one's come to me to say, hey, let me sort of, take you under my wing or mentor you and so on and so forth. But I was the one reaching out, and the community's thankfully been quite responsive. But it's not the case that, and I might probably be, going on to the discussion about advice about, what young people should do. Take the initiative, I would say, if we're going to get to that discussion now. But yeah, the Turkish Cypriot community has been responsive, but you can't sort of wait for them
to come to you.
Come to you.
You have to be a bit responsive. That's a really good point, actually, for young people out there. And we are going to touch upon that later on in the program. But certainly, I think it's a philosophy for everything in life. Rather than you wait for that thing or that person to come to you, it's good to use your initiative, especially within the workplace. If you want to work in a certain department, or you want to shadow a certain person's job, or you want to find out some information that you're not quite clear on, it's always good to be the person that goes and pursues that, for sure. So I think that's a really good ideology that you have, not just for our community, I think, but generally for life. We've got lots of comments coming in. Sorry, sometimes I'm looking down because we've got a new system, just to let our audiences know, where it's not on screen and I have to refer down to look at the comments. So I am still engaging, but it's just something I have to do. So I have to look down to read the comments. Hussein Hoja has said, good to see you on here, Serkan. Best of luck in what you're doing. Makes me very proud. So that's a really lovely positive comment as well. And Umit has said, well done, Serkan. I hope similar interviews continues for Turkish Cypriot dysphoria. Okay. So I think that's a hint, I think, that you're going to be interviewed a little bit more on other programs as well, which is great to hear. Fulia has put, great to see another inspiring and articulate young man in our community. I mean, how does that make you feel? There's lots and lots of very positive comments coming in. No one's asking any questions. Everyone's very supportive. I mean, how does that make you feel? Pressure or proud?
There's a danger of being conceited, a danger of hubris, which I, very much avoid, because I know, especially after going through a doctorate, that the more that I know, the more I realize I don't know, which grounds me. And, whatever successes that I've had in life, they've been contingent. So, the kind of resources and that my parents kind of invested in me, the love and care and the kind of attention and like the kind of drive and the motivation and so on and so forth, or the expertise of my teachers, or my support networks, whatever they may have been. All of my success has been contingent. I'm very, very well aware of that. It hasn't just appeared. I've had to kind of work for it, and I know also that there are far more. Depends how you define success, but there are lots of successful Turkish Cypriots. And there are far more successful people than me that have perhaps gotten to where they are in life, a comparable position earlier than me. We all have our stories and trajectories and so on and so forth. So, you can't do a really very sort of thoughtful or meaningful like-for-like comparison. And comparing ourselves to other people is perhaps disabling in a certain way and perhaps not very productive. But yeah, no, I don't feel sort of what's the word? Too boastful, or I don't have a lot of pride. Pride's a sin, I think, in certain sort of ways of thinking. But yeah, it's good to be humble. It's good to be grounded. But also when you realise actually that these successes they're not mysterious, they haven't come out of the blue. Then you can also sort of help other people, because you know how sort of things work. You know how much help people may need, and you can be in a position to sort of help other people, and that's something that I would like to, if I can, do. And I when I was young and I was reaching out in my doctorate for interviewees for my doctoral research, and people were very forthcoming to me. And now I find that people come to me, and they ask about, what's the doctorate like, how do I do it, and so on and so forth. And I'm always, very forthcoming.
Yes, of course, that's the way to be, really. I totally agree with your philosophy there, that to be humble and to be modest is always a good thing, because we're forever learning. And of course, you're very educated and very experienced now, but obviously every day is a new learning experience for sure. And it's great to hear that you're willing to, reach out and help others as well, and mentor others, because we need more people like you in our community. Like you said, in your family, you are one of the few people who educated yourself to that level. And what I'd like to see, and the whole point of my program, is to inspire more people in our community to become higher educated, or not necessarily educated, but definitely to fulfill their dreams and ambitions, maybe within business as well. And this isn't just for young people, but people, across the community of all ages, because people can, you could be a woman who's had 2 children and you didn't have much of a career before, but then you decide to, go back to university and educate yourself and have a new career after you have children. So it's not necessarily just young people, but definitely having people like yourself on my program is a way of engaging with our community and, getting them to be inspired. So thank you very much. And that would be very useful if anybody ever wants to get in contact with you. I'm assuming in like LinkedIn or something like that, then you're there to advise, which sort of leads me on to my next question. And that is advice to our youth out there. I mean, you slightly touched upon it again about being modest and not too big-headed, even when you've achieved quite a bit. Is there anything else that you would advise young people or anyone wanting to go into your profession?
This is a comment that was levied on this program. I watched a program a few weeks ago. Follow your passion. We hear this a lot. I would want to just add to that, or push back against it, because it's not just about your passion. It's following your passion is like being in a relationship and there's only physical attraction. You can't bank on it all the time. There's got to be more than just passion for something. There's got to be sort of grit, determination, discipline, support, and so on and so forth. And if you do follow a passion, just think strategically, I would say. Think a bit more long term, because you might follow your passion, but you might not make something out of it. And then you might end up disliking your passion. So you might get a job in something that you feel you're quite passionate about, subject matter that you're quite passionate about, industry you're quite passionate about, but the world of work might not be to your taste, or what happens in the world of work might not be to your taste. And then you might not like your experience, and then you might take it out on your passion. So you lose passion, possibly. So I wouldn't say just follow your passion. It tends to be that the successful people in life tell the younger people in life to do that, without sort of going through the entire process of getting there. Passion's one part of it. Thinking a bit more strategically, I think, is also a good idea. Sort of not reinventing the wheel, doing something totally different if there's no kind of market for something, or if there's no kind of proven business model for something. I would be just on the lookout for that. So just think maybe one or two steps ahead. I would advise to younger people. And there's also a saying, it takes a lifetime to learn how to live. So if I, with the experience that I've had, if I went back in time, I would do things a little bit more differently. I think that goes to most people when they've seen the way the world works and so on and so forth, and what the consequences of certain decisions were. I would say, okay, follow your passion, but it's not all just about passion.
Yeah, definitely. You've got to have that grit. I agree. And there's a lot of things out there about grit. And you've got to be setting yourself realistic goals, doable goals, and a step by step, some sort of a plan, most certainly, for sure. We've got another comment, quite a big comment. Gunil has put a question for Serkan. Did you face any issues while going up the academic ladder as a Turkish Cypriot? I do know some young Turkish Cypriots who have struggled due to subtle forms of institutional racism when they reach a high point, such as completing a PhD. Did you have the same issue? And advice? Some Turkish Cypriots even change their names to make it seem more English when applying for jobs due to this reason. What do you think about that? That's quite a question. I'm glad it's been asked, though.
Yeah, I can't say that I've been on the receiving end of any of that, especially not at Oxford. It's Oxford's kind of the kind of place where the geekier and quirkier you are, the better. It's not necessarily about the background and so on and so forth. It's people are very sort of topical. It's the point. It's the subject matter. I didn't want to carry on in academia for various reasons. I felt a bit sort of saturated. I've been in higher education for a long time, so I don't know what it would have been like if I went further. I haven't had to sort of change my name or anything like that. I've been through the job hunting process, and I know how sort of arduous it can be and prolonged it can be. And I never felt that there was a situation where my sort of ethnic background or so on and so forth held me back. It might depend on where you sort of apply for in certain places. I mean, if you were, let's say you're a Turkish Cypriot and you applied to work at, I don't know, a certain sort of ethnic background institution that was sort of not very favourable towards Turkish Cypriots, then yeah, your background might be taken into consideration. You might have question marks and so on and so forth. And in also, so for example, with media organisations, every single media organisation sort of has a kind of what's it called, a certain line, an editorial line that you would also have to adhere to a certain extent. But no, I don't think I ever had it where my background was taken into account. Only perhaps my background in my expertise or my education, but nothing sort of ethnic or racial.
That's good. It's all positive so far. You've given a very positive start on being a Turkish Cypriot, which is really good. And I agree. I think in certain institutions, it doesn't really matter. But obviously, I do think that institutional racism is out there. It's probably not as bad as it used to be, but it's probably still out there. So it's a shame if people, obviously come across it, but it's good news that that didn't happen to you. I'm sort of coming to the end of the program. Yeah, as far as you're aware. Well, put it that way, it went whoosh, so that's fine then. If it didn't affect you, then no problem. Your philosophy in life, we sort of looked at it a little bit. You said you don't want to be big-headed, you like to stay humble. Any other philosophies in life? I mean, we're going through very difficult times at the moment. I try not to mention COVID too much, but obviously, if we touch upon it, how that's affected you, has it changed your philosophy in life, or has it made it even more, whatever you thought before, you think, gosh, I really think this even more so now, and how that's going to affect your future?
Philosophy of life, I mean, it's a huge topic, lots to say about philosophy. I'm also, a bit more of a religious Turkish Cypriot conservative. I've become so over time, I wasn't like that all the time. I think that what COVID drives home is the kind of ephemeral, which the kind of transitory, if that's the right word, nature of the kind of human condition. What I mean by that is, how quickly and easily things can end, and how people can be sort of taken out of our lives. And I think that sometimes we don't want to think about these issues because they make us unhappy or something like that. But these are the big questions in life, I think, that we need to ask, and they're life-changing questions. They might actually inspire you to do sort of more with your time. I don't want to be sort of egging everyone on this kind of productivity cult or anything like that. What I would say is that, just be aware of, how sort of easily life can be kind of taken away, the kind of line between life and death. And it need not be a kind of morbid conversation or anything like that. And I think what that will make us appreciate more is, the kind of bonds that we have, our familial bonds, or, our kind of platonic bonds, or romantic bonds, or anything like that. Just to kind of not take things for granted. That's general advice. And I wouldn't want to be thinking about these topics all the time, but a reminder now and again is perhaps healthy.
Yeah, definitely, for sure. We sort of covered this at the beginning, but what I'd like to sort of end with is obviously you talking about your future and what your plans are for your future.
Yeah.
But obviously you're in Cyprus at the moment. You're living there, and what does it mean at this point? Obviously, you talked about your childhood and what it meant to be a Turkish Cypriot as a child, but what does it mean to be a Turkish Cypriot for you now? Like, do you identify very strongly with being Turkish Cypriot because you live there, or do you feel like you're much more connected to, United Kingdom? How do you feel about that?
Well, coming to Cyprus used to be a kind of summer holidays thing for me, as with most Turkish Cypriots. I'm working remotely here at the moment. Usually I'd be based elsewhere, and the UK is home almost. So we've got one foot in the UK, one foot in Cyprus. This kind of identity kind of politics is quite strange because I feel Turkish Cypriot, I feel British, I feel Turkish sometimes. I might just say Cypriot, perhaps a bit less. But you can have these kind of multiple identities. You can put other identities in them, like European or citizen of the world or something like that. So I've always been in touch with my Turkish Cypriot roots, and I care about them, and I'm the kind of academic of the family. I'm the one kind of recording stuff and finding all the old photos and writing down all the old stories and doing the family trees and all that. Someone has to do it. Someone should do it.
Yeah, that sounds very interesting, to be honest with you. That sounds very interesting. Oh, there's more questions here. Well, not questions, but statements. Hussein Hodges put, always be humble, so true. Don't look down at others. Real Cypriot thinker. So he's actually said that you really, what you've just said there is truly actually embedded within our culture. So that's really great. The future now. Oh, yes. Finish.
Well, I was going to say, modesty is also, part of our culture as well. We're not, it's been kind of encoded into our religion, into Islam. And even if you're not a believer and so on and so forth, that kind of, the religion has informed our culture. So it's quite interesting to be aware of the kind of social norms and codes, and modesty is a good thing, because if you do realize how contingent your successes have been, how lucky you've been, and so on and so forth, not knocking anyone's kind of hard work, obviously, you kind of have this humility, especially this epistemic humility, which means that you sort of you're very aware of what you know and what you don't know, how much you know. Especially when you do a PhD, they always kind of emphasize how sort of you may have pushed the boundaries of knowledge a tiny little bit somewhere, but there's a kind of vast kind of ocean or universe of knowledge to be had, and it's impossible for everyone to be aware of everything. That can be quite sort of advantageously humbling.
Yes, definitely. And the future, what plans do you have for the future, and lasting messages that you'd like to give to our audiences? Everyone's thought very positively of you, and that's great to see. And obviously, I think, your philosophies and the way you are obviously is the reason why. And I think that's a very strong message that we should give to our youth, is that, it's, yes, you can dream, but you need to set good targets and actually have that grit, and also be humble with it. But, whatever you do, whatever successes you have, it's really for your own benefit, isn't it, really? Not for anybody else's. So always, be true to yourself and humble. I really like those ideas. But anything else, what would you like to do in the future? Any lasting messages?
I probably will not let this go, but I always wanted to get into the energy industry. So that was my subject matter when I was doing my doctorate. And the grand plan was, having the academics and then going into the energy industry and kind of commensurating the two. And that's something that I'm getting here and there, especially for working whilst working at TRT World. I get to cover topics related to energy, Turkey's Black Sea discoveries, anything that's going on the Eastern Mediterranean Sea, the European Green Deal and the energy transition and so on and so forth. So those are great springboards and platforms into it. It would be great to perhaps work a bit more directly in the industry in some way, shape or form. It doesn't have to be oil and gas. It can be, something to do with, renewables and the sort of the green side of things. Politics, perhaps not. I mean, I couldn't really see
That's a tricky one, isn't it? Tricky one, always.
Yeah, I mean, the lifestyle, if you were, I don't know, a diplomat and having to move around a lot and, it might be hard to start a family and all that. And those are things that I'm, quite keen on, those kind of old, traditional sort of values and all that. But yeah, no, I think targeting the energy industry is a bit more as something that I've always been, pursuing in some way, shape or form. But, the kind of the journey to get there hasn't been very straightforward. But, I think I'm making the most of what I have now. And I think that's another good point if you want to throw that in there. Trying to kind of, squeeze it for everything it's worth, where possible. Everyone has their down days, and there's nothing wrong with that. You have your down day, you get it out, and then, try and move forward. There's, in your sort of weakest or darkest moments, and then the people that come out to help you, the kind of the wheat separated from the chaff almost. The people that are there for you, you kind of see them, and who's kind of there for you in the long term. I think that's a good sort of insight into the world. So there's always something to learn, even from like your most sort of negative experiences.
Definitely. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure interviewing you. And hopefully when you come back here to the UK and maybe our restrictions are lifted, it'd be really great to actually have you in the studio and we have another interview there with maybe a little bit more about some of the things that you want to do in the future. Maybe you might have achieved some of those as well by then, and it'll be great to hear about it. But thank you very much. It's been an absolute pleasure, Serkan, to interview you tonight. Thank you very much for all the comments from all our audiences. I think it's been really, really positive. Serkan, best of luck, and hopefully I see you soon. That's it from us from Eurogenç TV. Have a very good evening. Good night.
Biliyor musun? Erken rezervasyon başladı. Yazın en renkli fırsatları cyprusparadise.com'da. %40, %50 hatta %60'a varan kaçırılmaz indirimler. Erken rezervasyon yap, uçak bileti fiyatına paket tatili al. Uygun fiyata Kıbrıs tatilinin adresi cyprusparadise.com. Zaman akıp gitmeden acele edin. Bir bakmışsınız yaz gelmiş. Cyprus Paradise. Tatiliniz bizimle güvende.
Kalitenin, güvenin, hızlı teslimatın adresi Ancon Furniture. Ancon Furniture ailesi olarak yeni ürünler ile hizmete devam etmekteyiz. Yeni model koltuk takımlarımız Yatak mekanizmaları bir dokunuş ile açılıp bir dokunuş ile kapanabilmektedir. Bir dokunuş ile açtığımız yatak mekanizmasının yatak çarşafı kullanıma hazır, serili olarak içinden çıkmaktadır. Yıl sonuna kadar herhangi bir koltuk takımı alan her müşterimize akıllı sehpa hediyemizdir. En iyi ürün, en iyi fiyat. Sadece Ancon Furniture'da. Bize uğramadan karar vermeyin. En iyisini biz yapana kadar daha iyisi yok.